I paid for my stepmother's birthday party, but she didn't invite me to her birthday, so I left and stopped financing them. I still remember the moment I realized everything had shifted, though perhaps, in truth, it had shifted long before. It was a quiet morning in early March when I watched my stepmother, Yelena, scroll through her phone and sigh in disappointment. I knew that sound. She'd discovered something that didn't include her. Another family brunch, another invitation she hadn't received. I offered to pay because I wanted to help, to smooth things over, but the invitation never came. It was just another in a series of diminishing acknowledgments, like the slow dimming of a lamp. My name is Dmitri, and I grew up knowing the ache of being the odd one out. Father married Yelena when I was 14, after my mother passed. At first, we clicked. She was warm and kind, with a quiet sense of humor that made me laugh when sadness felt permanent. Over the years, though, I felt the warmth cool. Invitations stopped coming my way. Conversations grew hazy when I sat at the table. And always, I found myself scanning her face for an unspoken reason. Was I too different? Too quiet? Not herself? Then came her birthday, or rather, the birthday of the woman who once felt like a friend. Yelena's birthday approached in late April. I decided to do something big. I would pay for her entire party. I contacted a small, charming cafe in the old quarter of our city, one that looked out over blooming apricot trees. The kind of place that felt intimate, where you could hear voices carrying over tables, and laughter felt safe. I booked it for early evening on a Friday, a neutral time, easy for everyone's schedules. I imagined a scene wrapped in cobalt twilight, soft lights, and a warm hum of conversation that she'd appreciate. I arranged everything: appetizers with pomegranate and walnuts, a traditional grilled lamb dish she favored, sweet pastries filled with rose-infused cream. I hired a violinist who'd studied in Odessa and had a gentle, haunting tone. I even bought her a silk scarf in deep emerald green, a color I thought spoke of elegance without pretension. I wrapped it carefully in pale pink paper. I thought the invitation would follow. Surely, with all that effort and generosity, she'd invite me. But as the days went by, the guest list filled with her friends, some colleagues, some distant acquaintances. My father confirmed he'd be there. I smiled. It felt like we were falling back into an old routine, a family evening with everything in its place. Then Friday arrived. I drove to the cafe early and oversaw the setup. The violinist practiced softly in a corner. The candles glowed. The scent of rosewater drifted through linen tablecloths. I felt a swell of pride. This was going to be something lovely, something that made her smile in that soft way I once saw, the way that made me feel like we were connected again. I checked my watch. 5:45. I texted Dad, already here, tables all set. He replied, on the way. I sipped a glass of sparkling cider to steady my nerves. At 6, Yelena arrived, wearing a dress in midnight blue that complemented her dark hair. She stepped inside, paused, blinking at the scene. I walked over to greet her, wrapped in an ease I forced to feel natural. "Happy birthday, Yelena," I said, setting down the scarf on the nearest table. Her gaze flaked past me to the scarf, to the violinist, to the spread of food. She smiled, small, measured. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet. "This is really something." "Glad you like it," I replied. I felt my heart beat too fast. She nodded, and then, something in her eyes, no invitation. She didn't look at me again, turning to greet friends who filed in behind her. I watched, hoping for the moment when she introduced me. "This is Dmitri, he arranged everything." But she never said it. Instead, she moved through the crowd, chatting, laughing, and I realized I no longer mattered. 2 hours later, the party was in full swing. Wine had loosened voices. The violinist gleamed as she played. Guests complimented Yelena. She laughed, her smile lighter now. But I stood back, sipping my cider, an island of assurance breaking apart around me. In her applause toasts, she thanked her friends, the violinist, my father. Not once did she say "and Dmitri." The silence felt sharper than anything. At the end, as the evening wound down, they gathered to sing "Happy Birthday." I stood at the back. She held her scarf, smiling. I felt both relief and piercing regret. They sang. She blew out candles. They cheered. I clapped, but I wasn't part of it. Later, I drove home in the dark, headlights cutting through the rain. I thought about the amount I'd spent, the cafe, the music, the food, the gift. All of it for a moment that had never been mine. I thought about how I'd forgiven when I wasn't invited to family dinners, or left out of holiday plans. I remembered her sighs at my absence, my own avoidance of confrontation, my endless internal requests, "Just include me, please." But tonight, the catch had caught me whole. I was the financier of a party to which I didn't belong. When I got home, I left the scarf folded on the side table. I didn't speak to either of them. I just went to bed. The next morning, she didn't say anything about last night. It was like a lesson she'd already learned, a lesson I didn't sign up for. I felt empty. Betrayed. Used. I realized I couldn't keep funding this for no seat at the table. Something cracked inside me. As I made coffee, I silently vowed to stop. No more paying for dinners without an invitation. No more being the ghost sponsor. That felt like the first piece of something, self-respect, maybe. Or just the end of hope. I didn't bring it up for days. Not because I lacked the words, I had plenty, but because I was afraid of what those words might do. In my mind, I kept rehearsing how it might go. Why didn't you invite me? Do you know I paid for everything? How could you not even mention me once? But every version of that conversation ended with either anger or denial. Neither option felt worth the energy. Instead, I began to observe. Little things became louder in their absence of acknowledgement. Yelena made dinner the next evening and didn't ask if I wanted to join. My father offered to bring a plate to my room, as if I were ill or a guest. I declined. The scarf I gave her, emerald green silk, a shade I'd chosen with care, was never worn. I never even saw the gift box again. It had vanished, just like any remaining illusion I had that I was still part of their version of family. I began to calculate in my head. Not just the money, though it was significant, but the energy, the time, the emotional labor. How often had I said yes, just to keep things smooth? How many times had I filled the space where love was supposed to be? By the end of the week, I began making changes. I canceled the automatic transfer I'd set up to cover the electricity bill. I had been paying half ever since I moved back after university, part of my father's plan to help me get on my feet, which, over time, turned into a silent agreement that I'd keep contributing indefinitely. I also stopped sending monthly support for groceries. Quietly, decisively. No explanations. It wasn't revenge. It was just detachment. A few days later, my father asked over breakfast, "Did the payment for the power get delayed?" I looked up from my toast. "No," I said. "I canceled it." He frowned. "Why?" I wanted to say everything I had bottled up. But instead I simply said, "I'm not going to keep paying for things I'm not part of." He didn't respond immediately. He just stirred his tea, tapping the spoon against the ceramic like a nervous tick. Finally, he said, "It was a beautiful party. Everyone said so." "I know," I replied. "I was there." That shut the conversation down. That night, I heard them talking in low voices behind their bedroom door. It wasn't uncommon, they were both private people, but that time, I knew the discussion was about me. About the withdrawal. About the slow fade I had initiated. In the days that followed, a subtle coldness settled over the house. It wasn't hostile, exactly, just distant. We became polite strangers. Yelena didn't mention her birthday. My father stopped asking if I'd join them for coffee in the morning. The silence wasn't heavy, it was worse. It was comfortable. I started spending more time outside. Long walks, late evenings at the public library, hours at a small tea shop that overlooked the river. There, I could think. Or not think. Just exist. One evening, while scrolling through my phone, I stumbled on a photo someone had posted from the party, someone I didn't even know. There was Yelena, smiling, her hands clasped with my father's. The post read, "Beautiful celebration tonight. So glad to be part of such a warm family." I stared at the word family for a long time. Warm, they said. I'd spent over 2,000 hryvnia on that party, counting the food, the cafe, the performer, the decorations, the scarf. And in the end, I was just the man behind the curtain. The invisible son. I remember something odd happened a week later. I got a message from Yelena's sister, Natalia. We weren't close, but we had spoken at family gatherings. She messaged me, "You weren't at Yelena's party, were you? I thought I didn't see you." I stared at the screen. "I was there," I wrote. "I paid for it." Her reply took 10 minutes. "What? Are you serious?" She didn't even mention that. Everyone thought some of her friends helped organize it. "No," I typed. "It was all me." Her next message was one word, "Wow." I didn't answer after that.
But that exchange told me something important. Yelena didn't just forget me. She erased me. Consciously or not, she had edited me out of her life's highlight reel. That's when I knew this wasn't just about a party. It was about presence. About visibility. I had been tolerated, not welcomed. Useful, not cherished. I couldn't go on pretending that was okay. 2 weeks after the party, I packed a single suitcase and told my father I was moving out. I had found a small studio flat on the edge of town, immodest, but mine. I didn't explain further. I didn't owe them a monologue. He didn't ask questions. Just stood at the door, arms folded, eyes heavy with something I couldn't read. Yelena didn't come downstairs. I closed the door behind me and walked to the car with my bag. The wind was still cold, but it carried a clarity I hadn't felt in months. For the first time in a long while, I felt clean. Light, almost. Like I had finally removed a weight I had been trained to believe was my responsibility. In my new flat, I didn't unpack everything right away. I made tea, sat on the floor, and let the quiet stretch out. There were no footsteps overhead. No forced politeness. Just the honest sound of boiling water and the hum of my own thoughts. I hadn't cut them off. I just stopped waiting to be seen. The new apartment smelled like old varnish and dust the first few days, but it felt honest, like a space that hadn't yet learned to pretend. I left the windows open most nights despite the chill, letting the sounds of trams and distant voices remind me I was still connected to the city, even if I had unplugged from the life I once knew. I didn't hear from Yelena at all. Not a message. Not a call. No polite inquiry about whether I had made it safely, whether I needed anything. And strangely, I didn't expect one either. I think I finally understood what it had always been: convenience. I was an extra set of hands. A card that paid on time. A soft voice in the background. The moment I stopped performing that role, I disappeared from the script. My father messaged 3 days after I left. It was short: "Hope you're settling in. You left your scarf here. Do you want me to bring it?" I stared at the message for a long time. The scarf. The one I bought for Yelena. I typed back, "That's not mine. It was a gift." He didn't respond after that. Days slipped into weeks. I started to build small routines: early walks before work, a Saturday visit to the second-hand bookstore 2 blocks away, simple meals I cooked for one. I was lonely sometimes, yes, but it was a cleaner kind of lonely. It didn't feel like waiting anymore. Then one afternoon, I ran into Natalia again. It was at the marketplace, near the stalls that sold herbs and loose-leaf tea. She spotted me before I saw her, waving lightly as she stepped away from a vendor. She looked surprised and maybe a little nervous. "Dmitri," she said, "I've been meaning to call." I gave a small smile. "Hey. How are you?" She hesitated. "Fine. Just curious. I still think about what you said. About the party." I nodded. "Nothing's changed." She bit her lip, choosing her words carefully. "You know, she told everyone that she paid for the whole thing. Said it was her treat." My stomach didn't drop. I had half expected it. Still, hearing it out loud was like pressure behind the eyes. "Did she now?" "She even mentioned that the violinist was her idea," Natalia added, her voice low. I didn't know what to say. "It's all right," I said. "I didn't pay for recognition. I paid because I thought I was part of something." She frowned. "That's the worst part. You were." I shook my head gently. "No. I wanted to be. That's different." We talked for a few minutes longer, small things. She looked uncomfortable, like someone who had just seen an accident and wasn't sure whether to look away or help. Eventually, she said goodbye with an awkward hug and a quick, "You deserved better." As I walked home, I thought about how often that phrase gets thrown around. You deserved better. It sounds like comfort, but it also confirms the loss. You don't say it to someone who won. You say it to someone who was left behind. Later that evening, my father called. Not messaged, called. I let it ring once before answering. "Dmitri," he said, voice low. "I've been thinking." That was new. He wasn't a man of reflection, usually. About the party. You. Everything. Silence stretched on the line. "I didn't know you'd done all of that," he said. She didn't mention it. Not even once. I didn't respond. I wanted to hear the rest. I think, maybe I wasn't paying attention. I assumed things were fine. That stung more than I expected. That's the problem, Dad. You always assumed. I'm sorry, he said. I should have noticed sooner. Should have asked more. You still could have said something that night. When I left without a word. That should have told you something. He sighed. It did. But I didn't know how to fix it. It's not about fixing it, I replied. It's about acknowledging it. Another pause. Then, do you want to come over for dinner next week? Just us. To talk. It was tempting. The part of me that still yearned for connection wanted to say yes immediately. But something held me back. I'll think about it, I said. I needed time. Time to decide whether I wanted to reopen the door, even a little. Whether it was worth the risk. Because when someone shows you where you stand in their life, you have to choose whether to accept that spot or walk away from it altogether. The next morning, I found the scarf on my doorstep. Still in its pink box. No note. No explanation. Just the silk, neatly folded, untouched. She couldn't even keep the gift. I left the scarf on the shelf by the door for a week. It sat there like a ghost of the old life I had walked away from, delicate, expensive, and utterly unwanted. I didn't touch it. I didn't move it. Every time I passed, I let my eyes glance over the pink paper, waiting for some urge to reclaim it. But nothing came. Maybe I kept it there just to prove something, to remind myself of what it felt like to be erased by someone you once admired. By the second week, the silence became a sort of agreement. Yelena didn't reach out, and I didn't look back. My father sent another message midweek, dinner's still on the table if you're interested. I didn't reply immediately. I read it, set the phone down, made tea, washed some dishes, stared at the window. I needed the quiet. I needed to feel the weight of my own presence, without it being framed by someone else's narrative. Eventually, I responded, I'll come. Thursday. 7. That night, I stared at the ceiling longer than usual, wondering what kind of conversation I was walking into. Would it be awkward? Defensive? Warm? Would Yelena even be there? Thursday arrived with a dry breeze. I dressed simply, nothing formal, nothing sloppy. Just neutral. I didn't bring anything with me. No bottle of wine. No dessert. I wasn't visiting out of celebration. I was visiting to settle something inside me. When I arrived, the front door was already open, as if they'd been watching. My father stood in the hallway, hands tucked into his sleeves, a nervous smile tugging at his face. Dimitri, he said softly, stepping back. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. Something had shifted. Or maybe I had. Maybe that was the point. She's not here, he said, nodding toward the kitchen. Yelena. She's with friends tonight. I didn't answer. Just hung my jacket and followed him to the table. There were 2 plates. He'd made something simple, rice with grilled vegetables, a bowl of red lentil soup like my mother used to make. That surprised me. He hadn't cooked in years. We ate mostly in silence at first. It was strange but not uncomfortable. Like we both needed time to tune into the same wavelength again. I've been going through some old things, he said finally. Letters. Photos. From when you were a child. I didn't respond, but he continued. Your mother used to keep everything, he said. Every drawing, every card. Even the shopping lists you wrote when you were 6. That brought a smile to my lips, faint and reluctant. She was different, he said. She saw people. Made them feel seen. I looked up. And Yelena? He hesitated. She's not your mother. She never tried to be. And maybe I let that gap grow too wide. Maybe I thought if I just stayed quiet long enough, it would close on its own. It didn't, I said. I know. We finished the meal slowly. Afterward, he made tea and poured it into chipped mugs we used to use when I was a teenager. There was something comforting in the familiarity, even if it was laced with regret. She told people she paid for the party, I said after a long pause. Told them it was her idea. His face tightened. I didn't know. I nodded. It wasn't just about being left out. It was about being invisible. I'm sorry, he said, again. I should have stood up for you. Or at least thanked you. I didn't need a thank you, I said. I needed acknowledgement. We sat with that truth for a while, letting it settle between us like steam off the tea. Eventually, I asked, why didn't you say anything before I moved out? I didn't want to make things worse. I shook my head. Not saying anything was what made it worse. There was no argument. Just quiet acceptance. Maybe that was all we could manage. I'm not coming back, I added. I don't regret leaving. You don't have to, he said. But I hope this isn't the end. I didn't promise him anything. That would have been dishonest. But I gave him a nod. It was something. When I left that night, the sky was deep blue and scattered with stars. The walk to my car felt lighter than it had on the way in. My father had finally seen me not as the provider or the peacekeeper, but as a son who had been hurt. The next morning, the scarf was still on the shelf. I picked it up, unwrapped it slowly. The silk caught the light, rich and fluid. I held it for a long moment, then folded it again, this time not with anger, but clarity, and placed it in the bottom drawer of my wardrobe. A memory, not a wound. Weeks passed. Then a month. Then 2. My life settled into a rhythm of quiet independence. I didn't speak to Yelena. She didn't reach out. I imagined her pretending I didn't exist, as she always had when it suited her. And yet, I stopped resenting it. That surprise birthday party, the one I paid for, planned for, stood silently at the edge of, had been the final lesson. A cruel gift, but a gift nonetheless. My father messaged occasionally. Nothing heavy. Sometimes it was a forwarded article, or a photo from an old vacation we once took when I was 13. We weren't rebuilding what we had. We were building something new, something fragile, like a bridge over shallow, untrusting waters. It was a Sunday afternoon when I finally saw Yelena again. I was walking through the city park, scarf tied around my neck, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and lilac. She was sitting on a bench beneath a copper beech tree, sipping coffee from a paper cup. Alone. I could have turned away. Could have walked the longer path, pretended not to notice. But I didn't. I stopped walking, considered the distance between us, then approached. She saw me coming. Her expression didn't change. "Hello, Dmitri," she said. "Yelena." She gestured to the bench beside her. I stayed standing. There was a pause. Not awkward, just cold. "I heard you moved into the old building on Sadova Street," she said. "Natalia told me." I did. She took a slow sip. "I didn't think you'd talk to me again. I didn't think you'd pretend the party never happened." At that, her gaze flicked away. "I didn't think you'd care that much." That sentence hung in the air between us, too sharp to ignore. "That's the problem," I said. "You never thought I'd care. Or maybe you never thought I mattered enough to be hurt. I didn't mean to erase you. But you did," I said. "And you never apologized." Yelena sighed and looked down at her coffee. "I thought the gesture, what you did, was beautiful. But I didn't know how to respond. It felt like you were trying to buy your way into something." I blinked. I was trying to be included. That's not the same as being wanted. That stung. But it was honest. And maybe that was the first honest thing she'd said to me in a long time. "You're right," I said. "I should have seen it sooner." She didn't argue. I sat down beside her, not because I wanted to reconcile, but because I didn't want to carry the weight of hatred anymore. "You don't have to like me," I said. "But you should have respected me enough not to take what I gave and pretend it was yours." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, "I'm sorry." The words were brittle. Hesitant. But they were real. "I'm not funding anything anymore," I said. "Not because of spite. But because I deserve better." "I understand." I nodded, stood again, and left her sitting there beneath the rustling branches. I didn't look back. That night, I opened the drawer with the scarf. I took it out, ran my fingers across the silk. It no longer felt like a monument to shame. It felt like a reminder of the line I drew in the sand, and the life I chose to build on my own terms. I didn't throw it away. I didn't need to. Sometimes, survival isn't loud. It's not fireworks or confrontation.
Sometimes it's a quiet apartment with sunlight through the window, a steaming mug of tea on the table, and a calm heart. Sometimes it's simply learning that you don't have to buy your way into a family that's already made it clear they only see you when it benefits them. I paid for that party. I wasn't invited. But I finally walked away. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Have a nice day.